Alright, so it's time for us now to celebrate the 30th anniversary of a movie that isn't like one of the best horror movies or comedy movies or horror comedy movies in general, but it's still a fascinating film when you really think about it, right? That will be Vampire in Brooklyn, which was released in 1995. It came from the late great Wes Craven, and it starred Eddie Murphy, right? And all right, so pre-ramble time, right? We had to talk about when how we first saw the film, right? So for me, right, I didn't see this theatrically because at the time I was too young. I was just like a couple of years shy of being 14. So I remember the show being 14 years and over, right? But this was the time, folks, once upon a time, way back when, right? Where, yes, on local TV stations, specifically TTT or Channel 2 and 13, yeah, they would run trailers, like they would run movie trailers. I mean, they will just be like quick, like they'll just not so much TV spots, right? But they'll be edited to fit that sort of like runtime, right? So it will just be like, let me just say the average 90s trailer would run for like about 2 or 2.5 minutes. They will compress that to about a minute, right? And yeah, I mean, I would see the trailers this trailer, sorry, for Vampire in Brooklyn just all over the place, right? And at the time, right, I wasn't big on Eddie Murphy, right? But as a kid, I knew how big he was, right? Especially in the 90s, right? Because, as a kid, when you're just going about, you learn about life or whatnot, right? So I didn't really know about Coming to America till like years later on and stuff like that, right? But like in the 90s, I was familiar with Another 48 Hours. I was familiar with Boomerang. I still, even though I saw that film ages ago, I really enjoyed that film. I think that was like a perfect showcase of Eddie being the romantic lead. I think that works, especially with his pairing with Halle Berry. I think that film works as a solid enough romantic comedy drama. I think it really works, right? But then there was the Distinguished Gentleman, which, if you were to ask me, if you were to put me on, if you were to stop me and point a gun to my head and ask me what that movie was about, I couldn't tell you. I just knew it was a movie that came out in 92 or 91, I think it was, right? But yeah, or 93 for all I know, right? But yeah, I know next to nothing about that movie. And yet there was the ad that was on TV, right? And then, I should also mention too, way back when, in newspapers, yeah, it used to have like, like a specific, like, 1-2 pages where it would just be movie posters. I remember seeing the poster for, the Distinguished Gentleman there, right? But I never knew what that movie was about, right? So I bring all this up, right? Because I wouldn't see a majority of Eddie Murphy's films until I got cable. That was back in early 2000, right? So that was where I was able to see 48 Hours and Coming to America and Golden Child and stuff like that. Like the stuff that he did in the 80s. Thanks to Comedy Central, I was made aware that Eddie Murphy was part of the alumni cast of Saturday Night Live, and like the episodes with him, the sketches with him, I thought were fantastic, right? So in the early 2000s, that one I understood, oh, this man was like a OG when it came to like black comedians. Like, oh, okay, that's why he was so big back in the days, right? But it's just in the 90s, I just never got the chance to see any of these films theatrically, right? So let's move in too quickly, right? So when it came to Vampire in Brooklyn, I saw that movie on syndication through the kind folks at USC, right? So yes, and we make fun of these, these USA or TNT or TBS cuts, right? Where they will censor the dialogue.
All night.
Sorry?
I remember USA up all night.
Yes, yeah. I think I think when I first got cable, that Up All Night thing was about to be cancelled, but I will never forget. I think it was either Channel 4 or TTT itself, right? They would actually run USC, like, from midnight till like about 8 o'clock in the morning. And that's where I saw, like, okay, they will show like those syndicated movies and stuff like that. Well, TV shows or whatnot, right? They'll actually run USC, right? But yeah, when it came to Vampire in Brooklyn itself, I saw it on USC. And what I mean, like the cable cuts, that's how I should call them, right? They wouldn't just like cut out, like just take out the curse with itself, right? Like how it would be when we watch it on local TV. They would use an alternate word and it would sound very goofy, right? So
yes.
yeah, so like perfect
Yeah.
example, Die Hard 2, Yippee Mr. Falcon. That's like a perfect example, right? Or like Friday, get the funk out of here. Like those
Yes.
moments like really like stood out to me, right? But yeah, Vampire Brooklyn saw it. I liked it for what it was, right? But it wasn't a show that really stood out to me, really, right? I just saw it as a like, oh, like it was just a product of its time, and it just was what it was, right? And then eventually I
Mhm.
saw it uncut, right? I think it's through through Cinemax or something like that, right? Or when it was called Cinemax, right? And I saw it then, but I still don't remember much of it, right? And it was just always a show that never stuck out with me, but I just always remember it as just part of Eddie Murphy's filmography, right? For one specific reason, right? As over time that you learn this, right? That this was him really trying to branch out as being a dramatic lead, right? Because when it comes to Eddie Murphy, we
Mhm.
just always know him as a comedian, right? He always have to do
Yes.
the stand-up comedy sketch bits. He always have to do the he has to play a character, so he's always in makeup. And well, Coming to America did that brilliantly, in my opinion, right? Still to this day, one of the best examples of Eddie Murphy playing multiple roles, and it's just him over like mounds of makeup, right, on his face and whatnot, right? Perfect example, right? But
Yes.
but when it came to this film, it was you could tell when you rewatch it, because I did a week or so ago, right? Yeah, it was him basically saying, "Listen, I know I'm the comedic guy. I did action films before, courtesy of the Beverly Hills Cop films. But we should also mention, I should say, that prior to this movie, that's a year before, we had Beverly Hills Cop 3, which I recapped in preparation for Axel F, sorry, which came out on Netflix last year. And yeah, part 3 is terrible. I remember seeing it on USA, didn't care for it, I'll rewatch it. It was terrible.
Yeah.
It's really one of the worst films he ever made,
Yeah.
right? I could tell that really hit him hard too, because it's not just
Yeah.
it was a continuation of the movie that kind of put him on the map, right? Not just 48 hours, but it
Yes.
was really Beverly Hills Cop that really made him a superstar. But he teamed up with
Yes.
like
Yes.
John Landis of all people, though. I mean, OG director, right? So I mean, when Wes Craven came in now and say, "Here's what, let's do a vampire movie together," I can imagine that Eddie was just like overjoyed, like, yes, this is my chance to play a non-comedic role, and I could play a vampire. You know what I mean? I could do something really big, right? And I mean, vampire movies were big in the days, thanks to the masterpiece, still one of my top 10 favorite horror movies of all time. That would be Bram Stoker's Dracula, right? Amongst other films, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then when it came to Wes Craven, this was a really interesting moment in time in his career, I should say, because this was a year after he dropped Wes Craven's New Nightmare, which saw
Right.
him, I don't want to say putting the nail in the coffin, but this was basically him saying, this is the end of the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. I am ending this franchise on a high note, even though I only made the first and the last films. But I thought that, yeah, both films are brilliant. I know you guys, well, we spoke about it last season. Yeah, you guys love the
Yeah.
first the New Nightmare over A Nightmare on Elm Street, and still to this day,
Oh
I feel like
yeah.
I have
Yeah.
to.
And
Oh yeah.
a little background trivia is like New Nightmare was basically the bones of what is it. We have Scream due to New Nightmare, because the whole meta concept of a horror movie within a horror movie, a horror movie that acknowledges that horror exists in real life, that kind of thing. That's where we get Scream from. So maybe we might not have had Scream if there wasn't a New Nightmare, and I dig that. I love that.
Yeah, same here too, right? So yeah, as a wrap up here, right? So two things, right? So even though this film was not well received, like actually it received negative reaction, right? I actually watched Roger Ebert's and Gene Siskel review the film. Yeah, they did not care for it at all. They felt that it was part of what they thought was Eddie Murphy's slump as far as like an actor goes, because yeah, they pretty much echo what a lot of people felt about the film back in 1995, right? I didn't even know it till like years afterwards, right? They felt that it was neither funny nor scary. it was supposed to be scary, it was supposed to be funny, and they felt like it was neither. You know what I mean? And they just did not care for Eddie Murphy as Maximilian, the vampire here. They felt that there was a step down as far as Wes Craven, because yeah, at that time Wes Craven was known as the guy, right? Like his name is synonymous with horror still to this day, and they felt like, wow, like this was just this wasn't even a horror. Like, what is this, right? Like, who is this for, right? But I felt like in retrospect, right, for Wes Craven, this was him kind of testing out, a horror comedy. How does this work? Let me try this out, right? And it's so funny when you hear this after fact, right? Because Eddie was the one who wanted this to be pure horror, and Wes was the one who wanted it to be a comedy as well as horror. And it just didn't gel for some odd reason. It just didn't gel, right? Even though when you watch it, you see the attempts. And it's like, I admire what it is they were trying to do. But I just felt like if, both Eddie and Wes were just in tune with each other, they would have created a masterpiece, right? Because it's not easy to make a horror comedy. I
Yeah.
felt like Wes really took a huge risk with Scream, and because he went with the meta route, that's why that movie, became, the
Yeah.
classic that it is, right? And then lastly,
Yeah.
as far as Eddie Murphy goes, right? If it wasn't for this film here, we would not have had the film that I think to me was like the peak
Yeah.
film when it came to Eddie
Peak Eddie
Murphy and his
Murphy. Yeah.
power in the 90s, like his
Yeah.
influence as a comedic actor, and that would be in 96's The
The
Nutty
next
Professor, which I didn't
Yeah.
get to see because I was still too young, but I will never forget how big of a deal that was. The music videos, the trailers were all over, especially during the summer, because I used to watch a little show called Party Flavor by Request, right? Which is hosted by O'Brien Haynes. I'll never forget, there were like 2 or 3 music videos from that movie that was just in
Yeah.
heavy rotation with that, right? And I mean, just that movie was just a juggernaut, though. And again, going back to Eddie's comedic talents, it was him tackling the multiple roles, and this how he was able to do the Clump family is brilliant, in my opinion, right? And I'll close
Yeah.
this, right? I eventually saw the film on USA, and even though it is not one of my all-time favorite Eddie Murphy films, I still absolutely enjoy this film. And I'm actually one who kind of prefers the Clumps as in the sequel over the first film, because that one just spun a lot of plates and somehow it worked. It even had Janet Jackson and she had a great song in it as well, and it worked. It was doing a lot, but somehow the lot works. You know what I mean? It's a sequel that did a lot. It was sequelitis, I would admit, but it was great sequelitis in my opinion, right? But yeah, this was where Eddie took this shift into the more PG-13 route in the late 90s. I think the only R-rated film he did was Life, which I think is a criminally underrated Eddie Murphy film. It was a great pairing between him
Agreed.
and Matt Lawrence, and they did the makeup thing,
Yeah.
courtesy of Rick Baker, R.I.P. But yeah, without I would say without Vampire in Brooklyn, both Wes Craven and Eddie Murphy would not have taken these paths that they did, and I would say they were successful paths, right? Like they really came out of this way better than they expected, than expected, right? Given how
Yes.
poorly received the movie was, right? But still, there's a part of me that wishes, sorry, that yeah, if they had just gelled together, just creatively, yeah, we would have gotten a masterpiece out of this, right? But I mean, for what it's worth, it's still a cult classic, and it deserves that title, right? But I just wish it could have been the masterpiece that I know both artists wanted it to be, right? And I'll stop there. So yeah, Alicia, I should mention this, as we draw the attention to you, you wrote a great article, celebrating its 30th anniversary, and I will,
Yeah.
and if you look at the description of this video here, you'll see the link here. But yeah, Alicia, your history with the film, in particular when you first saw it, and yeah, just comparing it with Wes Craven's and Eddie Murphy's work back in the 90s.
Well, like you, I was too young to see it when it came out, and also up to this day, my mom always had an issue with Eddie Murphy's jokes being kind of too much on the raunchy side. So she never really let me watch too many of his films when I was younger. I was able to watch The Golden Child, I think. And when I was a bit older, like about maybe around 13, I got to see Coming to America. So Vampire in Brooklyn, I didn't get to watch until would consider like being an adult, maybe like around 17 or 18, when it came out on cable like yourself. So it took me a while to see the movie and to understand it, to appreciate. It is actually more of a groundbreaking film that people don't really realize how much of a groundbreaking film it was at the time. But like I said, with age and rewatching it, because I rewatched it more than once over the years because I quite like the film. I really get to understand what was going on the screen, and the older I get, the more I see, like what you said, Wes and Eddie weren't really meshing, and you see that pull and tug going on the screen, and that is why the film got such negative reviews because of that pull and tug. And honestly, I was one of those that thought maybe the film should have just gone all the way dark and gothic, because when the moments when Eddie was scary on the screen, he was scary. He did quite well. But as I said, in rewatching it for the 30th anniversary, I was only now doing research that I saw a lot more stuff was going on behind the scenes that affected the actual production of the movie. I don't know if you guys noticed, but a stunt woman was actually killed on the set as well too. Angela
Yeah,
Bassett's
Yeah, I
son,
found it out after the fact.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, was killed on set too, and they say that it affected the general mood of the film. Eddie Murphy gave Wes Craven a lot of trouble because of creative differences as well too. He would be like hours late to the set for filming, and when they had the last day of filming, Eddie left before,
Oh god
and
damn.
yeah,
Oof.
yeah,
That is
he
rough.
did
That
yeah,
is rough.
limo just pull up, he went in and he disappeared, and he didn't even finish filming all his scenes because at that point he was just
yes, checked
creatively
out.
frustrated. Yes, he was
Yeah,
checked out. He was just creatively frustrated. Because and it wasn't only West that was against him too, because Eddie wrote the script with his brother.
I should mention, R.I.P. Charlie Murphy. I think if it wasn't, if I could just make quick segue, right? If it wasn't for
Mhm.
Chappelle's show, Charlie Murphy would not be immortalized the way he did, because yeah, that sketch
right.
with Rick James is a masterpiece in my opinion, a masterpiece.
Oh, yes, yeah, yeah. Iconic storytelling. Storytelling at its very best.
Agreed, agreed. But
Mhm.
yeah, yeah. Continue on, Alicia.
Yeah. So he was really hoping to go the more serious route, but he had two things working against him. Like you said, Wes Craven wanted to dip his toes into the horror comedy aspect, but also Paramount Studios also wanted to hold Eddie to the comedic roots because Vampire in Brooklyn was the last film under his contract with Paramount Studios.
Yes,
Yeah,
that is true,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
Nutty
yeah.
Professor is
And he
Universal.
agreed.
right.
Yes, yeah, yeah,
So they kind of pressured him into kind of trying to keep the comedic roots instead of going switching up his what is he's known for, the genre or what he was mostly known for. And I thought it was kind of sad, and I could understand his frustration because after a while of being typecast of having to do the same thing and everybody's like, Eddie Murphy, do something funny. After a while it kind of gets old and frustrating for
yeah. I think
him.
it's something. Not
Mhm.
cutting you off, but I think it's something we see with all comedic actors who try
Yeah.
to go the dramatic role. You have to
Mhm.
fight and push, and to
Yeah.
me the only person, I might be wrong, besides
Mhm.
Robin Williams, the only person I could think of who didn't seem to have that struggle as much was Adam Sandler. And that's because he locked out because he got to work with the great PTA
Yes.
on Punch
Yeah,
Drunk
Punch Drunk
Love,
Love. Yeah,
Yeah, right.
I'll also make the argument that Jim Carrey made an effort. I think he made a strong effort with the Truman Show. That was him making that
Yes,
transition. And if it wasn't for that, even though
yes. And even
he didn't succeed with the number 23, at least we
yeah,
wouldn't have had
or
Eternal
Cable
Sunshine.
Guy. Yeah, I think Cable Guy was to me
Yeah.
the first time I saw Jim trying to do something darker.
Yeah.
And
Agreed.
I
Yeah, yeah.
will and I will be also I will own up to the fact that the first time I saw Cable Guy, I was like, what is this? I don't like this. And then
Yeah.
when I
Mhm.
saw it again, I absolutely loved it because when I gave it that chance. So yeah, for Eddie, I feel like building on what Alicia was just saying is that I do see. the background stuff. To me, it was a case of studio interference
Yeah,
and too many cooks. I honestly feel like if it was just Eddie and Wes, because Eddie being such a huge fan of Wes Craven, I think Eddie
exactly.
would have taken the lead from Wes if given the opportunity. But studio
Right.
interference and then Charlie also writing and Charlie probably leaning more towards the comedic stuff as well. It's too
Mhm.
many cooks in the kitchen, that sort of
Yeah.
thing.
Well, I don't want to
Right.
put the blame on Charlie, right? Before we get back to you, Alicia, but what happened, I think, is because
Yeah.
Wes wanted more of the comedy because initially Charlie wanted to keep things straightforward, right? Because he brother wanted it to be
Right.
straightforward, but Wes is like, no, we need a comedy, we need the comedy. So they were like, all right, well, let's just add more comedic bits, right? So that's why there's
Yeah.
more of I would say more of a really contemporary by 90s standards urban slant when it came to this whole vampire love story thing in this film.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. The other thing about it too is why I mentioned that the film is more groundbreaking than people want to give it credit for is the fact that let's be real here. We've seen a lot of vampire movies where predominantly white people. We have never seen a vampire movie where it's predominantly black actors and very well known black actors. Because Angela Bassett was always very big back in the day, coming off of the Tina Turner biopic as well too. And
That's actually true. Because I would make the
yeah,
argument that with Blackula, right, which came out in 1972. I
right.
forgot the actor's name. I'm sorry, but yeah, I don't think. Well, unless you probably were aware of like late 60s or early 70s movies, or especially black exploitation movies, nobody probably knew
Mhm.
who the lead was, who played Blackula in that film and Scream Blackula Scream, right? But yeah, you're right, right? In this case,
Right.
it's a well-known actor, right, who is playing a vampire here, right? Is that's a big deal. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. It is a big deal. And I also enjoy the kind of unique spin that they did where they try to incorporate the Caribbean folklore from Jamaica and
What's it?
kind
What's
of
it? What's no? Okay. Well, all right. Okay. So this is just the hip hop head in me, right? But
yeah,
understand that in the mid 90s there was a love for reggae, right? For reggae,
mhm,
right? Not dancehall
right,
as yet, but reggae, right? So yes, there's
right,
reggae music in the film, right? There's actually like a reggae
mhm,
cover of Superstition, which
yeah.
which caught me by surprise, right? But I thought initially that Eddie Murphy's character was from Jamaica, but they said that actually he's supposedly from Bermuda. Like he moved from somewhere in Africa to Bermuda or something like that, and that's why he
He
tried
said
to do
he
it.
Yeah,
did
Yeah.
he said that he said the vampires because he does acknowledge Dracula in a bit of a
yeah,
cheeky way. There's a
yeah,
line where he says like the ones with taste, the Nosferatu with taste went to the Caribbean, and
yeah,
they were actually hidden in an island in the Bermuda Triangle.
right.
So that's how they were never found.
Right.
Until they were, but
Until they
yeah,
will, yeah.
yeah,
I don't know if Dracula 2000 copied from this, but there is a the fact that the female lead is half vampire and half human. It's an element that's used in Dracula 2000 as well too. Someone knows this very well in that
yeah,
storyline where Van Helsing's daughter is half human, half vampire, and Dracula senses this, and for once of a better word, wants her, and it's like a kind
hmm
of similarity in terms of that element that's using his storyline, and also too, even though I would have preferred that, yeah, they went the more serious route, they can't deny that the two characters that Eddie interprets in the film where he changes his identity from Preacher Paulie to I think it's
yes,
the Italian mobster slash hitman.
hmm
He does a very good job with that. The Preacher Paulie speech about evil being good and
Evil is
evil
good.
being
Evil is
It's good.
good.
Yeah. I'll talk about
yeah.
those
It
two
is good.
characters later on. I'll talk about them too. But go on.
That is some of my classic Eddie that I always
Yeah,
love. It cracks me up every time I see that sequence.
hmm
Yeah, but other than that, like I said, it's a totally underrated film. And like I said, if it wasn't like Summer said for the studio interference, and if they could have just been more cohesive and not so many problems behind the scene, it could have been stronger in terms of its cult following and so on, and its influence in modern cinema. But it shouldn't be ignored in other ways. I think at least if you call yourself a horror fan or at least an Eddie Murphy fan, you need to watch it at least once in your lifetime. Yeah.
Agreed, agreed. All right, so Summer, your history with Vampire in Brooklyn, in particular, and in particular, sorry, with Wes Craven's and Eddie Murphy's work around that time.
Honestly, I cannot remember if I saw it in cinema or not. I might be dating myself because I'm a little older than you guys, but I may have seen it in at the movies. My history is I've always been a huge fan of Wes Craven. I don't think there was a Wes Craven film I hadn't seen at that point. And of course, Eddie Murphy, like you guys, my parents would have kept me away from like Raw, Eddie Murphy's Raw and that sort of thing. But I was aware of who he was. I think I would have seen Trading Places, Coming to America, all that sort of stuff. Um, and it was a first of all, it's Dracula. I am right there. It's vampires and werewolves being my favorite classical monsters. I definitely wanted to see this, um, and I am one of those people that I didn't need it to become a cult classic. I loved this movie from day one. First of all, I thought the practical effects. It's the practical effects is something I always would go for that over special effects, CGI effects, I should say, which this movie does have. And of course, it hasn't aged well. But the practical makeup, like Eddie's makeup in his like true vampire form and stuff, I think a lot of that stuff looks really good. And it's one of the things I really love about the movie. I did also love the twist on the mythos because I don't think prior to Vampire in Brooklyn, I don't remember any vampire movies besides the more philosophical ones like A Vampire's Kiss and that sort of thing. That would have taken place in a city. That was so rare because most vampire movies would definitely, most of the time, they were all reinterpretations of Dracula. And while this is also that, it takes taking place in an urban setting was a big draw for me as well. The aspects of it, besides the great effects and that too, I the story was something that I knew about. Because this is Bram Stoker's Dracula. All most Dracula stories, the love story is basically the same. It's Dracula looking for his lost love, and I thought they did a really good job of reimagining that stuff because instead of a case of her being like somebody reborn or reincarnated, it's a whole thing about, oh no, well, vampires in this world is they're actually born that way. I think Alicia, you could tell me if I'm wrong, but they're more born that way. It's a race of creatures as opposed to they're running around biting people. And
Yeah.
she is like this, yeah.
If the vampire was able to impregnate Angela Bassett's mother, it
Right.
seemed
And
like
she
Yes,
it
yes,
be
was
like,
yes.
just
yeah, yeah. So it's like a race of beings. And so I felt like they were definitely doing what they could to add their own original aspects to the story. And I always appreciate that. It didn't feel, there's nothing about this that feels lazy. And I give it huge props for that. They feel like they were doing their best to do something that would have been unique. And maybe in the time it came out, it was a little too unique because, as Alicia touched on, people you don't see black vampires, and I'm sure that's where the studio and even Wes, as you said, was like, oh no, well, it's got to be funny. So you got to put those black jokes in there, that kind of thing. And you even have the Italian jokes and that sort of thing. And that may have rubbed Eddie the wrong way. And you will see moments where he seems like he's not as interested. But the darker elements, he is definitely terrifying. And if they had played this straight, I feel like Eddie would have surprised people with how dark he could go with the role. Um, where the movie does suffer for me is because they have that tug of war, that back and forth on, oh, it's got to be funny, no, it's got to be scary, no, it's got to be funny. You do have a very inconsistent tone, because this movie will go from having a guy have his heart ripped out of his chest to the next scene being, a funny scene with Julius and what is his character's name again? Maximilian. You know, they granted, I love those funny scenes. I am one of those ridiculous people that quote this movie like it going out of style, right? Funny enough to, yeah, when Matthew told me he was gonna do a review for Vampire in Brooklyn, a retrospective, I should say. Um, I had just pulled this out of my DVD collection and rested on top of my Blu-ray player, saying, "Okay, this is the first movie I'm gonna watch for this season." So yeah, that absolutely the funny stuff. I appreciate it. I know it affects the tone, but I wouldn't have it any other way. I'll be honest with you. I love seeing Eddie play these characters. It's something he's so good at. And like I said, it does, because of this, we got the Naughty Professor. So I'm grateful all around. Um, the other element for me, Angela Bassett here, um, it is not one of her best performances. And that's not me going after the great Angela Bassett, because she even says that she struggled to find the tone of the character. She struggled with the swing, the back and forth between the comedy and the drama. So I know I don't blame her. I think it's the writing, because they don't know what they want her to be. Do they want her to be a damsel in distress, or do they want her to be this tough as nails cop? And it swings and it swings and it swings. But for all this movie's flaws, there is a heart to this film that is undeniable. There is a charisma to this film that it somehow manages to rise above all of the inconsistencies and that weird ending that doesn't make any sense when you think about it, and all of that
That's
stuff
true.
I
That's
can
true.
yeah, all of that
Yeah,
stuff I
oh, Juliet puts against a vampire from just putting on Maximilian ring. I will never understand.
I don't
right
know.
it right? I always sit there with that end, and I'm like, what? How? But you know what? I can forgive it, because there's just there's just enough here that works with this movie. And like it is the charisma, it's the actors. There is enough good here that the bad is forgivable, and I can see why this would become the cult classic that it has become. And I know maybe Eddie might look back on this and be like, ugh, I don't, not this movie. But for me, I would not want to live in a world where Vampire in Brooklyn doesn't exist. I absolutely love this movie. And horror comedy, it's never easy to do. It's never easy to pull off. And they were trying to do something that we didn't really see a lot of in the 90s when it came to horror comedies. Because horror in the 90s struggled. I don't know, a lot of people might look back. The early 90s, there was a period there where after slashers, people felt like, the slashers had burnt out and that sort of thing. Late 80s, early 90s, where horror was just, it seemed like it was a dying genre. People were still making horror movies, but there wasn't really anything that anybody was talking about. And then you have films like Vampire in Brooklyn come out, and good or bad, people were talking about it. People were watching it, and enough people, I think, appreciated it that it now has that cult classic status that it does. Because to get that status, it means enough people have seen this to say to a friend, hey, come and sit and watch this with me. I promise you like it. It's gonna be funny. It's gonna be cool. So yeah, I would give Vampire in Brooklyn, I guess I would say like a 6 out of 10, just to be fair. A 6 out of 10. But it is definitely a favorite of mine, and I don't think that's ever gonna change. Inconsistencies aside, I don't think that's ever gonna change. There's enough here that I really, really appreciate this movie for what it is.
Right, right, right. Well, for me, no, just recapping it, right? Cause listen, I could talk about the bad a lot, and when it comes to like a lot of like new or contemporary reviews of this film, yes, they like to zero in on the bad stuff, right, or just the stuff that don't work, right.
Yeah.
And I mean, yes, I mean it is like okay, like I'm not gonna waste your time like just going over everything that doesn't work, right. I would just say the few things that don't work for me, just right out the gate is just that tone, right. I just felt like it's like for me, like there's nothing wrong with, blending horror and comedy, right? I mean, I mean, if you've checked on my list, right? Shaun the Dead, right?
Yes.
That's number 6 for me. That did it so well, right? And I felt like this one really, really struggled, right? Where you wanted to lean into the, oh my god, it needs to be scary because it's classified as a horror kind of thing, but you also want to be
Yes.
comedic because of the lead of the actors involved, right? So
Yes.
while I think he's the MVP of this film, right? Kadeem Hardison, though, you know what I mean? And, this is right
Mm.
after, A Different World and stuff like that, right? I should mention that
Yeah.
he was in a movie that I saw ages ago. I was supposed to recap it for this, but I didn't get the chance to see it, right? Called Death by Temptation. That's DEF by Temptation. This came out in 1990. It also starred Samuel Jackson. This was before this is right
Okay.
after he blew up with Spike Lee's with the writing, right? But yeah, this was
Right.
basically Kadeem in the lead, and the antagonist, the villain in this case, was essentially a succubus. Yeah, and it was just basically this.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
like it's the whole female seducing male, but it's a succubus, and that's what it is,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, it's one of those
I know
like
Kadeem
little
has said
known
this is his
films.
favorite movie as well. So,
Oh, he loved it.
that says
Okay,
a lot.
well,
He said he identifies Vampire in Brooklyn as his favorite movie he's done. So
okay.
so
Oh, I
I
didn't know
guess
that one.
yeah. Somebody had fun. At least one person had fun.
Yeah, but I think for me he is like he just has so much fun in the movie, right? And he gets way more, well, I should say, compared to the late great John Witherspoon, right? Which a lot of people in the Caribbean would be exposed to through still one of my favorite sitcoms ever, the Wayans Brothers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, even though John Witherspoon wasn't in the film as much, it's really Kadeem Hardison, though. Every time that he's on screen, he shines, right? Yes,
Yes.
he's annoying, but that's the point, right? He's supposed to
That's the
be
point. Yes.
the
Yes.
Renfield to this
Yeah,
Dracula here, right? One thing that
Yes.
that,
right.
that I like, though, but it's 90s urban cinema, right? Yeah, he kind of looks like a crackhead. Like he looks
He
legit
does. He
like a
does.
crackhead,
Yeah.
right? At times,
Yeah.
and at times I was also kind of comparing him to, still, and forgive me for saying this, right? The greatest crackhead ever put to screen. That would be Chris Rock
Dave Chappelle.
from no no no
Oh,
no
Chris,
no no
oh, Chris
no
Rock.
Chris
Yes, yes,
Rock,
yes.
New Jack
Yes, I
City.
know the movie. You
Yeah,
know, like, yes, yes,
which
yes,
is one of my top 10 favorite movies of all time. This is like the best
yes.
hood drama crime action movie ever made, in my opinion. I mean, Wesley Snipes in that was fan freaking tastic, right? Nino Brown, one of the best
And
villains
it's
ever,
Chris
right?
Rock's best performance ever.
A lot of people will say
Honestly.
that even he makes fun of that too. It's like, yeah, like I think he said that oh gosh, with his response to the slap that Will Smith gave him, the like, look, like
Oh,
you really
okay.
expected me to fight him? Like, look, I'm Pookie, like I can't be Will Smith. I think he said that, right? But speaking of New Jack City, right? Before I get back to the floors, right? I forgot that Alan Payne, who played G Money in New Jack City, so he was like the
Yes.
he was the
He was the hot guy in the 90s, for black
yes.
films. He was the hot guy, yes.
Yeah, but all right. So for me, like my first exposure to him was New Jack City, right? And I just love the pairing between him and Wesley. That final dialogue that they have is great in my opinion. It's excellent in my opinion. It's Shakespearean, and fun fact, they both have theater arts background. So even though it's a hood
Right.
drama, they still brought that energy. I just love that scene so much, right? But yeah, Alan Payne was sort of a heartthrob back in the days, right? So forgive
Yes.
me,
Yes.
forgive me, Summer, forgive me, Alicia. I know how big Jesus' lyric was. I still haven't seen it. But
And I
again,
think
forgive me.
Eddie chose him for this movie, yeah? So Eddie picked him for this movie. The same way he picked Angela. Eddie called Angela and
Yeah,
told Angela to come and do this. So yeah.
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 But I think that they have excellent chemistry on screen, though.
I agree. I agree.
No,
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
no.
Eddie
Yeah,
and
no.
Eddie and
I have
Angela.
nothing against the chemistry. Yeah. Like I said, it's not them. It's the inconsistencies of the tone not doing favors to
Yeah,
the characters. You know.
yeah, yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah. But that's the thing. This movie, as Matthew, you said it so well. And this movie could have been a masterpiece. But
Mm-hmm.
you see those you see the pull, you see the back and forth,
Yeah.
you see where,
With
oh,
the
this scene
detachment.
was
Yeah,
probably written one way, but then they
yeah.
told them to do it another way. Oh no, don't do that
Mm-hmm.
serious, do it funny. And
Yeah.
so you see where that was hampering the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed, agreed. So, like, when it came to Alan Payne, for example, I felt like, there could have been more to the character than, oh, he's down bad for, Angela Bassett's
Yeah,
character, right? And yes, you do feel sorry
yeah,
for him at times. For me as a man, I was just kind of cracking up at points like, wow, boy, boy, like that moment with Kadeem's Julius, right? His character, right?
yes,
It's showing up in the stretch limousine, and then you just sort of watch like, oh,
yeah.
he thought he was gonna get some ass, right? Boy, that
Yeah.
that, that hurt, but at the same time, I laugh because
Yeah.
it's how Julius say
I
it so
I
brazen.
love
I love that.
I love this scene. I love this scene when Hardison Maximilian is being all gentlemanly and sophisticated and sexy in the bar. The scene
Oh,
with the snake when he saves her from the
Yes.
snake.
yeah.
And
Mm.
Yeah.
he's making headway, and then here comes Julius being all disgusting,
But
And
exactly.
looking even more of a crackhead than he did before.
right?
But I'm like, wow, boy.
Right, and breaking the spell, so to speak. But funny enough, you say, I know he's the heartthrob, as you say, but I was all for Maximilian. I've always,
Yeah.
and when I watch these types of vampire movies, Matthew, I am always rooting for them to end up together. To
Yeah.
hell
Me
with
too.
anybody else. So I always
Yeah.
have to brace myself for the tragedy because
Mm.
in these movies they never get the girl. Something always happens because it's
Yeah.
always Bram Stoker's Dracula ending.
Right.
So,
Right.
but I am all for Maximilian getting Angela at the end of the movie.
Yeah,
I,
me
I
too. Yeah, because yeah,
Yeah.
when they're on screen, they really have that magnetic chemistry, right? I just felt like
Yeah.
in retrospect they could have had more moments with them together. Because listen,
Yeah.
Mhm.
while I do, I actually love, I actually see this flat out, right? I love the pace of this film. I love how it just goes in. It doesn't waste any time. It just sort of it just hits the ground running, right? It doesn't really waste any time, right? I love how it just flows because basically this is roughly about an hour and 35 minutes along with credits, but it just moves at such a it's quick, but at the same time it doesn't waste any time, right? So I love the fact that we don't have to wait long before Maximilian even meets, Angela Bassett's character and woos and all that kind of stuff, right? That being said, I felt they could have had more moments with them together. I felt like Angela could have warmed up to him way more natural than him having to seduce her to the point of doing the whole dance thing. And understand that's for him to do the spell, right? And just to go back to Alan Payne one more time, I felt they really could have given him more than just be the down bad guy who works with Angela, as because they're both detectives, by the way, right? And sorry, I just couldn't buy into him doing a couple of karate kicks, on any movie. I was like, all right, but it looked
Yeah.
like he did it, and I'm not the guy. I made a joke that maybe he learned some karate from Wesley Snipes, but I was like, nah, I just can't buy into you know, doing
Yeah.
two kicks on a vampire. Like, really, bro? You know. If I have one
Eh,
gripe though with the romance that the film was trying to set up between Eddie and Angela's characters, I felt like Angela's roommate, I forgot her name in the film, right? Yeah, I felt that was shoehorned. I
Yeah.
Yeah.
understand why it was there to have that sort of shocking moment, like, oh my god, like he could kill this woman after he made love to her. Wow, you know what I mean? And it's supposed to be, it's designed to make you feel scared for Angela, once she hooks up with
Mm.
with Eddie's character, right? But I felt like
It's also um it's also to draw on the whole analogy of Lucy and Mina. from the Bram
Yeah.
Stoker's Dracula, because
From
the character always has this friend who is supposed to be a bit more
promiscuous.
Promiscuous, yeah, yeah.
promiscuous.
Mm.
Yeah.
But
Granted, in the
sorry,
book, she's not
but me,
promiscuous. She's just very flirtatious, but
yeah, but
they
sorry,
always make her out to be promiscuous.
yeah, but Mina had more character though than this character did. Like Mina was going, I think she was engaged to
To
someone,
see.
right, right,
No, you're right. The character does feel very strong, and like they're like, okay, well, we need her, we need this scene because we need a body count to her, because
Right.
there's some characters that you're just there to die,
yeah,
and
Yeah.
so they don't develop a friendship. They make it seem like they don't even like each other.
that's true,
They're not.
Yeah.
They're not
yeah,
friends. They're
yeah,
not friends. And then
and
she dies.
yeah,
So
and
she dies. She's
right,
there, and then she dies. So you don't care. You
yeah.
don't care.
And the Bram
Yeah.
Stoker's fan in me was expecting her to be turned into a vampire as well, and then we've gotten something akin to with Mina rising out of the coffin. Like I thought we was gonna get something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, instead we
Yeah.
just have her just like put as a like just dead, and she's like her body's positioned as a cross. And yes, it's early 90s horror stuff. Like when I saw that for some odd reason, I was reminded of Candyman, even though like it just has sort of like a early 90s horror reveal. Like, oh my god,
Yeah.
the
It's
poses.
funny. It
Yeah,
reminded me of a movie called The First Power. So that scene is just, there's a scene in The First Power that with a cop that was nailed up like that.
Mhm.
It's
Right.
very reminiscent of that. I don't know if that's where they draw it from. Yeah, because
I
that came out in
remember that
1990.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's actually a
That's what
favorite
I
of mine
meant.
as well. Yes,
Yeah,
that's
but
a favorite of mine as well. Yeah.
yeah, but I felt it was just a missed opportunity where the film could not have capitalized on that relationship between Eddie and Angela, because yes, they just had the chemistry in there, and especially Eddie, boy, Eddie was smooth with it. I like that. He's a man like he would say the right words. Like he would say a lot, but he just
Mhm.
always know the right
Yeah.
things to say to get Angela to smile a bit. Like I like those moments, right? I even like, where after she's bit and when she starts turning into the vampire, I like those moments. I felt like she commits to that very well, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Right, so just a couple more flaws, right? So yes, even though they are great comedic bits, though, I felt like maybe they should have just written it better, right? That would be, the pastor, or just say the preacher character, and especially
Mhm.
that Italian sort of like gangster fella, right?
Guido.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Guido, right? Yes,
Yeah.
the preacher part is really solid, right? Especially the evil is good stuff. That's really good. I always remember that from the show, right? From watching it, right? That being said, though, I had an issue with just in retrospect, I had an issue with the makeup work. I felt like I don't know like how to describe it. Like I just felt like the rubber that was on his face just looked a little too thick. Like I
No,
don't know.
yeah,
Like
it looked.
it's too thick,
Yeah, it was a
he-
bit. It was a bit shiny.
yes,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
super pretty.
Yeah, like I understand, like okay, like you can look at it as, oh, this is Maximilian interpreting, oh, this is how an archetypal black preacher would look like, right? Because he nailed the voice and the delivery, and that's how he was doing the sermon,
Mhm.
right? But because the original guy looked the same exact way, I was like, I don't know, maybe the guy should have looked less cartoonish, if you will, and then when he
No.
transforms
Yeah,
into
they
him,
definitely
it would have been
hadn't
more
perfect
exaggerated,
the. Yeah, they hadn't perfected that, but it's definitely you see the groundwork for like what's to come in Nutty Professor. But
Yeah.
Yeah, but even Nutty
so
Professor had better like makeup
oh yeah,
with the
because
face, even though
what
it's
yeah,
fat
wasn't Nutty
characters, right?
Professor
Yeah,
Stan Winston?
Yeah.
Wasn't that the Stan Winston, the Nutty Professor?
I think it's either him or Rick Baker. After
Rick Baker,
yeah.
right.
Yeah, but even though those characters were exaggerated because they were fat, right? Especially like the mother and the grandmother and stuff like that. Like they
Yeah.
still look like like normal people. They're just exaggerated. That's what I'm trying to say, right?
Yeah.
And then with Guido, who I didn't see coming, right? Yeah, unfortunately they had to trade a lot of like Italian
Yeah.
was he what they're looking for? Not so much slurs, right? But yeah, cliche
Yeah.
stuff like with the
Cliches.
Mamma
Cliches,
Mia
yeah.
and
Yeah.
all that stuff. It was
Yeah.
like, but it was
Yeah.
convincing, right?
It
The
hasn't
makeup is
the
convincing
Guido
enough.
stuff. The Guido stuff hasn't aged well. I did, but on rewatching it, I was like a little bit cringe with the Guido stuff, you know. And I'm
Yeah,
But
sure Italian people were probably like, ugh.
yeah. But
there are
I
some
do
jokes
I
that
do
are
like
really
the.
don't stand up well.
Sorry, just repeat that, Lisa.
There are some jokes that really do not stand up well against the test of time, especially in the society that we live in now.
Yeah.
You really saw
Mhm.
Vampire in Brooklyn the way it is, they will have a big protest
That
outside the cinema.
that's true. No, you see the thing with that now the bad, right? So what like what that character was trying to be, I would say, is the Jewish character that Eddie played in Coming to America. But you see, the
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
beauty about that character is
Yes,
that nobody
the
knew it was him
yeah.
until those closing credits, and a lot of people was like, myself included, was like, what? That is you,
And
because yes, you know
And
the
funny enough,
barber
the
was.
makeup was so
Hmm.
much better. The makeup was so much better, and that's an older movie.
That yeah, that's
Yeah.
true, because yes, we know the barber was Arsenio Hall. We knew that, right? But we did not know that the Jewish guy was Eddie Murphy. That was a big deal, right? But the
No,
makeup was
no,
stellar compared to both the preacher and Guido in this. So like I just felt like, I don't know, boy, like because I really should look up and see who did the makeup for this, right? If it's Rick Baker or
Yeah, it
somebody else.
wasn't anybody that no, it wasn't Rick Baker, it wasn't Stan Winston. I don't know the team. I don't know the team, but they seem like I would say the work seems like you're trying to do Rick Baker. You know, you're trying to emulate that type of work.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But I will say, with the Guido character, the payoff at the end was worth it though, where he was in the police station and then he do the switch back to Maximilian. He's like,
Yes,
"Oh, he went that way." That was great. That
yes,
was great, and they kind of justified the
yes.
reason why the character was there
hmm
in the first place, right? You know.
Mhm.
There's a couple of moments where I was like, "Wow, like Wes don't care about animals though." Like that moment when the dog caught me by surprise. It's so funny, but it's so absurd at the same time. Huh? What made it so
Yep.
funny for me though
And
was the dog falling into the ocean. I was like,
yeah.
wow, boy, that is so funny. Yeah?
Yeah.
And then the
Yes.
cat gets shot by Guido. I'm like, what? What?
Yeah.
Yeah. And fun fact, right? The last credit that you see at the end of the film is that is oh gosh, I forgot the American Association involved with animals. So they just basically say no animals were
Yes,
harmed. They make it
PTA.
up. Yeah, no
Yes,
animals were
yes.
harmed. I just love the fact that that was the last credit that you see. No animals were harmed. In the making of this movie, I'm like, wow, you do something a dog and a cat do. Like, what is this, right?
Hey,
Um,
I just noticed Greg Nicotero was one of the people on the special effects team. That's pretty amazing. Greg
okay,
Nicotero,
okay.
of course, is the makeup, the makeup the Walking Dead.
Walking Dead. Yeah,
He
yeah.
did the makeup, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Now there's a couple things,
He's iconic.
yeah, he is. Yes, there's a couple things more, couple before we wrap up, right? I do like the incorporation of like folk horror in the sense of oh, there's this Caribbean backstory to all this, right? So I do like the sort of like mystic character who shows up, the guy who got scarred by Maximilian like years ago. I like that. I like how he kind of works in the whole folk element of it all, like um,
Uh,
uh huh.
Sorry to interrupt you, Matthew, but it wasn't Maximilian that scarred that guy, you know. It was Angela Bassett's father
Oh, right, right,
because
right,
he
right,
was
right.
in love with Angela Bassett's mother too.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. Yeah, you're
hmm
absolutely right. Yeah, and
Yeah.
it kind of reminds me, oddly enough, of Okay, so what was that Wes Craven film that he did? Was it what is the Serpent and the give me the name?
Serpent and the Rainbow.
Serpent
And
and
the
the Rainbow.
rainbow.
Yes, yeah, which I
hmm
saw
Mhm.
ages ago on cable. That's why I forgot the
Awesome
title.
movie.
Right, but that also had this. Oh, in the Caribbean, there's this thing. You know what I mean? Like this is folklore stuff. That's what I mean. Like the folklore element that was in that film. I like
hmm
how he was able to recapture
Yeah.
that in this film. Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And lastly, just in terms of just the character of Maximilian himself, right? Here's the thing, right? I am iffy about the accent that he adopts because it kind of goes in and out between
It
Eddie's
comes and
real
goes, yes.
voice and him trying to be Caribbean, Um,
Yeah.
Yes.
they have one moment with him in the limo, and Julius is acting like a complete fool, and he's like, "God damn
Yeah.
it!" You know what I mean? I was like cracking up
Yeah.
at
Yes.
that. I was like, "Wow, that accent, what is that?" Right? I felt if he had
Right?
just nailed an accent, it would have worked. Or maybe he should have just tried to sound like a serious version of himself, as in Eddie Murphy. That would have worked well, right? But I think with him trying to do the
Yeah.
Caribbean thing, it kind of bounce. It kind of goes back and forth, right? But as far as the villain, no, and this, if I'm not mistaken, is his first and I think his only villainous role. Yeah, I think he nails it though. I
Yes.
think that he is quite
Think
convincing. I like
so.
that he's
Yeah.
charming. He is darkly funny when he needs to be because I like these quips that he makes. Like like I just had Italian. Just paraphrasing here. Like his quips, no, they work as well. I even dug the narration that he does. I think that it adds a little bit more extra detail to the film as well, right? I like that he is charming, when it comes to Angela and her roommate that I didn't really care for. But then when he does the complete heel turn and that's when Angela turns into the vampire. He's like, yes, this is what the life is, and there's no turning back and all that kind of stuff. I actually like that. Those
Mm-hmm.
moments make him really genuinely scary, right?
Mhm.
Even if
Yes.
even if you don't buy into him killing those two Italian gangsters at the beginning, and that's how he met Julius in the first place, when he actually bites Angela's character and she turns into a vampire, and then he really shows himself for who he really is, yeah,
Mhm.
that's when you really buy into him as a villain. So yeah, it's a shame that again,
Yeah.
that he just didn't really get the chance to really
Yeah.
commit to this performance, right? But I felt for the
Yeah,
most
Right.
part
because
it
his
works,
version, yeah, because what I did like, what I've always liked about his version, he is charming and charismatic, all of that, but there's a selfishness to Maximilian that doesn't exist with not that it doesn't exist, but Bram Stoker's Dracula has always been at its core a love story. With Dracula, I have crossed, as Gary Oldman said, he took the role just so he could say the line,
oceans
I've
of
crossed
time
oceans
to
of
find you.
time
I love
to
that line
find
so
you,
much.
right?
Yes,
It's
yeah.
such a cool line, right? And but why we so invested is because Dracula loves Mina. He
Right.
definitely loves Mina, or he
Right.
loves what she represents, which is his reincarnated love. Maximilian,
Right.
on the other hand, is a sense of he does not want to be alone,
Right.
and there's a more selfish nature to what he has with Ange, and I think it works better because of how fast it goes. Because with Bram Stoker's Dracula, we had a couple hours to develop the love story, and we get a sense of a lot of time is passing. So we
Right.
buy into Mina and Vlad falling in love. We buy into that story. If they tried that here, it would have felt forced. Cause it'd be like, we should just meet this man. How the hell,
Exactly.
But Maximilian gives you this feeling of urgency, of time is running out. He needs
Yeah.
to get a mate. He needs to have this done. So as Matthew, as you said, when he bites and she starts to change and he has no patience with her, he's like, this is what it is. This is what we are. And he's
Yeah.
more aggressive with it. And I like
Yeah.
that they didn't just try, like I said, they didn't just to give Jack his jacket. They weren't just trying to copy Bram Stoker's Dracula. They were trying to give Maximilian a sense of not just being a black Dracula.
Yeah.
He's a vampire and he is his own character and he is selfish and he is, self-serving, but there is a side to him and the very, very end we see it, that may have grown, you could see he probably would have grown to love her if she had given him the opportunity, you
Right.
know that
Yeah,
stuff works for me.
yeah.
That's where I see where, if with a little tightening up and a little better writing and less studio interference, this could have been amazing.
Hmm.
Agreed. And lastly, you brought this up already, Alicia. Oh, yeah. Well, you brought it up already, you guys, right? That ending. Okay, so like on paper, I kind of see what you're trying to do. So okay, so we have to show like Julius can't just stay a ghoul and body parts dropping off all his life, right? So we had to find
Right.
some way for him to turn into a vampire himself, right?
Right.
But What I felt they could have done in retrospect, right, was with the whole ring thing, right? And it was like right there, the ring, right? It should have had some of Maximilian's blood in it, right? And maybe, just spitball in here, it have like a needle, sticking out of it. It's like when he puts it on now,
Right.
it sticks him and then, the blood goes in and then he turns, right? But this one is like he just puts it on and suddenly he turns. I'm like, what? And then all of a
I
Yeah.
sudden,
mean,
he get the
they could
mannerisms
have.
down. It's like, oh, there's a new vampire in town. His name is Julius. I'm like,
Yeah.
what? Like I
They, you
get
know,
kind of, but
it's
no.
such an it's such an easy fix. In that all you needed was one scene with Maximilian and Julius. And Julius saying, am I going to stay like this forever? And Maximilian saying, no, my power passes on to whoever I last, who was ever my last servant. Simple, simple. Because
Yeah.
you know what? It's supernatural. We would buy into it, right?
Right.
We would have had an explanation for it.
He would have been
This
called
is
to the
where
pause. Yeah.
this is something that irks me in you see it a lot in television shows where you create a universe, you create a world with certain rules, and then you act like your
It,
own
it,
rules
it,
don't exist. Yeah.
yeah.
So you say that Maximilian is not vampires don't bite people and create them, that it's a race of vampires. But then you give us an ending like that. Pick your
Mhm.
poison, If you want to do
Yeah.
the ghouls turn into a vampire thing, then you gotta say he's a vampire by
Right.
biting. That's it.
Yeah.
So it feels a bit tacked on, like a last minute idea. Oh guys, we gotta reward Julius. Instead, Julius, if you want to go that route of they are born that way, Julius should have just turned back to being a normal human.
Yeah. Because his master is dead.
Yeah, yeah. But
Yes.
you see, you wouldn't have
Mhm.
a. I don't know, like I understand the show just wanted to reward Julius for surviving. That's really what it is. It's a hey, you survived, so here's a reward. That's the end. I get that, right? But it could have done it much, much smarter. And again, you could pull from, vampire law and come up with something more plausible. Like I mean, come on, man. But yeah,
Mhm.
as a whole though, despite its flaws, right? I actually quite enjoyed myself rewatching this film, right? I didn't find it was a chore recapping it or it was like a waste of time. And I could understand how people felt about it back in '95. I was actually surprised that it got such a negative reaction back then. Like I thought like it was probably mixed. Like some people liked it because it got the whole urban horror thing, and that was kind of a thing going on with
Mhm.
films like Candyman, and in '95 you'll have Tales from the Hood, which I think is one of the best like urban horror films ever made in my opinion. A great anthology film, by the
And
way.
one of the best anthologies, yeah.
Yes,
One
yes,
of the
yes.
best
Yeah.
anthologies ever done,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. So
Yeah.
I thought people would have buy into it more as a like it's a urban thing. Okay, cool. I like that. That's new, right?
Mhm. Yeah. It's because of the same thing with the uneven tone, Matt. Because either way, the more time that passes and the more understanding that we get of the film, the pulling and tugging is very very obvious in certain circumstances. So even back in the day, you probably adults who saw the film back in the day, that was their reaction. That's why they got such negative reviews because it's like, okay, well, make up your mind what you want to do now. You want to be a horror or you want to be a comedy. It can't be both.
Yeah, agreed.
I would argue, just my final thoughts is, I would argue there are some movies that do not require critiquing. You know what I mean? There are some movies that if you just switch off and enjoy it, you will get more
Yeah.
out of it that way. And
Actually,
Agreed.
it
yeah.
might seem like a silly thing to say, but this
No,
is
no.
I know I
Yeah.
tell people sometimes maybe my sense of humor is too childish. I don't know, but there are films like this one. There are films that
Mhm.
people are like, oh my god, I can't believe you're watching that. That is so stupid. I'm like,
Yeah.
I like it. I don't care.
Yeah.
I'm very aware that it's a flawed movie. For me, sometimes it's just about enjoying the humor of these things. And like the Pope's Exorcist, the movie is funny. I don't know if the director meant for it to be so funny. I highly doubt he did, but it's hilarious in how, and I wouldn't even say how bad it is, but just how ridiculous and over the top it is. And for me, that's what Vampire in Brooklyn is. It's over the top, so I can switch off and just enjoy this for the silly story that it is. Even though I know that's not what they were going for, but it's what it has become. And I like I said, people who are reviewing it now are doing retrospectives of it and still like, oh, this is terrible. I mean, to each his own, but I find that there is enough charm and charisma to this movie that there's a lot I can just switch off and say it that doesn't matter.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, right? So for me, I could see this as a guilty pleasure at the moment, right? Well, I should say more of a cult classic. After give it a couple more viewings for me to say yes, this is an absolute guilty pleasure, I could give it like a 4 to 5, right? Which I usually give guilty pleasure movies, right? With the exception of a little movie that came out just the other day, War of the Worlds, which is so bad I gave it a 5 out of 5. I think it's one of the greatest bad movies ever made. Whatever. But in the case of this though, I would give this a light 3 out of 5. It's alright for what it is. Like when I was watching it, I was like, yeah, I see what they were coming from, and stuff like this. I see how it kind of subconsciously impacted other vampire films. Like I can't be the only one who thinks that if it wasn't for this film, we wouldn't have Blade. The whole vampire in an urban environment, and you have this woman who thinks that everything is all normal, and then she gets roped into this weird world of vampires, and she eventually gets bit and all that kind of stuff. Like I was like, yeah,
Oh
I
my
could
gosh,
see
I see
shades
it.
of Blade in this. Like wow, yeah. I was thinking about Blade, right? I think it's because Alan Payne is in it. I was like, hey, Wesley Snipes, Blade, right? Duh, right? I don't know. I just saw that. Right? But it is not the worst Wes Craven movie ever made. It's not the worst Eddie Murphy movie ever made. I mean, there's far, far more terrible Eddie Murphy films that we could pick from, like what, A Thousand Words, Pluto Nash,
Norbert.
Norbit. Like there's so much, right? Or I should say not much, but
Uh,
like there's films that are way worse than this, right? But it's
yeah.
just unfortunate
Yeah.
that this film, let's start to wrap up here. It's unfortunate this film came at the tail end of what was admittedly a creative slump for Eddie Murphy, right? Because after let me just say, in between the slump there was Boomerang, which I know was a hit. But yeah, another 48 hours, Distinguished Gentleman, what else? I forget the names right now. Beverly Hills Cop 3. Yeah, they were poorly received, right? And then of course, well, Vampire in Brooklyn was like, well, yeah, this what's going on, Eddie, right? That's what people probably were thinking back in 95, right? But just to see him transition so seamlessly into like just big budget, well, even more of a big budget territory with Nutty Professor, yeah, it's just a testament to just how talented this guy was, right? But again, like I said at the beginning, I don't think that he would have reached that level if it wasn't for this movie here, right? And same thing goes with Wes Craven. We wouldn't have gotten Scream if it wasn't for this film, right? So yeah, you kind of have to acknowledge and appreciate at least what the attempt that was made with this movie, right? But in no way would I say it's a terrible, horrible movie. But it's just a film that, again, I see the potential in it, though, and I just wish that if everybody on board was just on tune in tune, sorry, yeah, this would have been one of the greatest like horror comedies ever made. Because I still hold on to the belief that this would have worked as a horror comedy. As what it is, it would have worked if the horror and comedy elements just gelled more, right? But yeah, that's just my opinion. So yes, Alicia, your final thoughts and rating. And well, some I know you gave a rating already, but you could just probably if you have any more things to say, you could just say it.
Right.
Well, I gave it a rating of 2.5 out of 5. It has become a film that is a permanent fixture on my guilty pleasures list. I think it gets a bad rap, you know. I'm hoping that with the passage of time, that more modern day audiences give it a chance, so that maybe the Rotten Tomatoes rating will go up a bit. Yeah, like I said, it's a very groundbreaking, iconic film, and I just wish for it to get a little more love. That's it.
And for me, it's like I said, you guys, it's a 6 out of 10 for me, and that is who I usually give the films that I think it is a little bit above average for me. And a 5 out of 10, I wouldn't have been revisiting it all the time, unless like I want to put on something in the background while I watch the whales. This one, this is a 6 out of 10 for me. I'm with Alicia. It's not even a guilty pleasure. I feel zero guilt. I love this movie. I enjoy this movie for what it is, flaws and all. And it's a movie that, like I said, it was the first movie I put on for this spooky season. And next year it's probably going to be the same thing again. It's going to make my watch list because it's funny, it's creepy, it's flawed, but it has some memorable lines in it, lines that I quote every now and again, like a weirdo. And it's given us, I think it gives more than it lacks. So for that alone, it deserves to be on anybody's spooky watch list.